What's going on, Jets fans? Welcome into the Jets Report. My name is Patrick Siepman, and coming up on today's show, the latest around the Jets head coaching search, where we are going to be talking about two Mikes on today's show. Mike Tomlin, Mike McCarthy. Does it make sense for either of those guys to be the next Jets head coach? So we got a lot to talk about on today's show. But before we do so, I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. Who do you want to be the next Jets head coach, whether that's Flores, either McCarthy or Tomlin, or maybe you want to, go back in time and rehire Rex Ryan. You guys just give me your thoughts on who you want to be the next Jets head coach. Comment your thoughts down below. All right, let's dive into it. Mike McCarthy, does it make sense for him to be the next Jets head coach? Well, Tom Pelissero tweeted this out early on today, saying sources, Mike McCarthy is out as Cowboys coach. The sides couldn't agree on length of contract, and McCarthy will pursue other opportunities. He leaves Dallas with a winning record and 3 playoff appearances. And we have already heard that the Chicago Bears and the New Orleans Saints could be interested in Mike McCarthy being their next head coach. So maybe the Jets could be next in line. And I promise you this, the Jets have already probably interviewed about 20 candidates, or at least put in request to interview about 20 people so far. I guarantee you they will put in a request for Mike McCarthy. No stone will go, unchecked here in the whole Jets head coaching search here. But let's just dive into Mike here, because I think his reputation is, I feel like he's not fairly, talked about amongst NFL fans. And what do I mean by that? Because I think when you just hear hear Mike McCarthy, him being the head coach, I feel like automatically the common NFL fan would just say, oh, he stinks. He got carried by Aaron Rodgers, Brett Favre. He got the Dallas. He was carried by Dak Prescott, all these players. But I mean, the man has been a coach in the National Football League for almost about 20 years now. And his regular season record, 174 and 112 with 2 ties in there. Postseason, 500 coach. It's tough to win in the postseason, but he's 11-11. And then his career record is 185 wins and 123 losses with 2 ties. And, Jets fans, we haven't had a lot of success here over the last, decade or so. Mike McCarthy would at least come in here and he would stabilize this organization, where he would at least, get the most out of this roster. And maybe you wouldn't be able to reach the peaks of these other coaches like Andy Reid, Sean McVay, Jim Harbaugh, like these other coaches. But I still think Mike McCarthy would do a way better job than any head coach that has been in this organization over the last couple of years. And if you just even break it down by each team he's been with the Packers, 125 and 77. With the Cowboys, 49 and 35. And also keep this in mind, when he was with the Cowboys throughout his whole 5 seasons there, they had the second best scoring offense in the league, only behind Josh Allen and the Bills. So they were even outscoring Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Sean McVay and the Rams, they had a better offense than those other teams. And I think Mike McCarthy, who took over play calling 2 years ago, he deserves a lot of credit for that. So let's just dive into some pros and some cons here of McCarthy, because by no means I'm saying, the Jets need to go out and get him. I just don't think it would be as bad of an option as most people think. So my number one pro, franchise stability. He would offer you that. I guarantee you, if he is hired as the next Jets head coach, we will not have a season next year where it's 4-13, 5-12, and it would be an absolute disaster. One thought on this that I should have said at the top of today's show: if McCarthy is a serious candidate for the Jets head coaching job, Aaron Rodgers will be out of town. There is no chance McCarthy and him will, reconvene as that quarterback head coach combo. Just want to put that out there. But number one, I got franchise stability, and then I'm going to put a good, not great offense in mind. If you would hire Mike, you would have a good offense. I just don't know if you would have a great offense, because even though I think McCarthy gets the most out of his weapons, like we've seen CeeDee Lamb have great years, even like Tony Pollard, being the running back for Dallas, I'm sure Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, those guys, they would love to have McCarthy at head coach. But again, it will come down to the quarterback play in terms of the difference of his offense being good compared to great. But also, I like the connection he can make with the quarterback position. And, with the Jets probably going to have a new quarterback in this organization this upcoming season, you would want to have a head coach who can relate to him. And what better guy than Mike McCarthy? He could say, hey, I worked out with Brett Favre. I worked out with Aaron Rodgers. I worked out with Dak Prescott. Whoever that next guy is should have some sort of respect for Mike McCarthy and what he's done, throughout his NFL career. But, with pros, got to talk about the cons here. So, number one con, I'm just going to say it puts a limit on your ceiling as a football team. And, I hate saying this because he has won a Super Bowl, so clearly he can go and win the big game. But I just think now where he's at in his coaching career, he doesn't have the highest ceiling compared to some of these other guys. So that's what I'll put as the first con. Second con, I'm going to go game management. This has been something that he has struggled with, even dating back to his days with the Green Bay Packers. So, not the best guy, end of the first half, end of games in terms of timeouts. But again, I'm not going to have that completely hold up me hiring him compared to another candidate out there. But another con, he's 61 years old. He's a little older. But still, I'm not really too concerned about that. He still seems very youthful, still brings a lot of energy there. But still, being 61 is not great. And he is trending in the wrong direction in terms of the playoffs. Now, is this a Dallas Cowboys stat? Or is this a Mike McCarthy stat? Him being 1-4 in his last 5 playoff games. We'll kind of have to wait and see. But those are kind of all my thoughts on Mike McCarthy. We'll talk about Mike Tomlin here in a second. But you guys make the call for me. Would you hire Mike McCarthy? Give me a Y for yes or an N for no down below in the comment section. You guys let me know your thoughts. And let's just dive right into it. Here we go. Mike Tomlin, part of the show. And I will say this. We're going to call this reckless speculation. There are no real reports out there that the Steelers are letting go of Mike Tomlin. But if they do, could the Jets make some sense? Well, we'll break it down here. So Mike Tomlin, it's funny. He's not similar to McCarthy, but when we start breaking down these pros and cons, I'm going to start repeating myself, comparing the two of these guys. But, he's been in Pittsburgh for a very, very long time, 191 and 118 record there, has never had a losing season, but he also hasn't won a playoff game since I believe 2016. So you got your pros and cons with Tomlin. But the one thing about Tomlin that I would like is I think the Jets need a tough head coach. And there's nobody better than being a tough head coach than Mike Tomlin. And you might be saying, tough head coach, what does that mean? I want a guy who's going to add some sense of physicality to this team, because I'm always a big believer, like when you think of New York, and you think of let me just use Los Angeles with the Rams, for example. They're a flashy city, and they have a flashy offense. Well, New York, it's a tough city. I want a tough head coach, and I think Mike Tomlin, fits that to a T. And even Pittsburgh, that's a tough city as well. And him being a tough head coach, clearly it has worked out. So let's dive into some pros and cons here. So number one pro I got, he's a culture setter and a leader. There's no doubt about it. He will get the most out of every single roster out there. I wholeheartedly believe that. Like, if he would come to New York, I'm thinking about two guys, Sauce Gardner, Quinnen Williams. I'm sure they would take the next steps in their career. And plus, he would just be a leader, which the Jets have not had in that organization. Over the last 2 years, it's been Aaron Rodgers, one of the worst leaders. Where if you would bring in Mike Tomlin, you would be one of the best leaders. So I love that aspect of it. But also, 18 seasons of having 0 losing seasons. I've seen people starting to bash this recently, saying like, oh, who cares? I care. I think that's a great stat. Even though they haven't been as successful deep in the playoffs for the last couple of seasons, still really awesome stat that, hey, no losing seasons the last 18 years. He also was a Super Bowl champ back in Super Bowl 43, so he's gotten over the hump just like Mike McCarthy. And, AFC North, one of the toughest divisions in football. The man won that division 7 times. And with where the AFC East is right now with Josh Allen, Tua and the Dolphins, and Drake May and the Patriots, it's going to be a tougher division moving forward. And if you want a guy that's familiar with playing in tough divisions, Mike Tomlin is just that. But let's dive into the 3 cons of Tomlin here. And you guys probably already knew, what the first one was going to be here. But last playoff win, 2016. I'm not sure if this is a Steelers stat or a Mike Tomlin stat where, the Steelers just have never had a good enough offense, I think, to go on a deep playoff run. I've always felt like the defense has carried, those teams. But still, last playoff win being 2016, not great. And also, is he the best guy in terms of hiring offensive coordinators? I remember back with the Minnesota Vikings when Mike Zimmer was the head coach, he would bring in a bunch of these OCs, and he just didn't really have a good feel for it in terms of his later career with the Minnesota Vikings. So maybe Mike Tomlin, like these defensive guys, they have a tough time connecting to the offense. So I don't love that as well. And then also, offensive line issues always have been there in Pittsburgh. And I'm not saying that if he's the Jets head coach, like, oh, they would have a terrible offensive line, but just, telling you like it is, what has happened in Pittsburgh, they haven't had playoff success. Offensively, have not been successful, and then a lot of misses on that offensive line. But those are my thoughts on the 2 Mikes on today's show. But you guys just got to pick one for me. Give me an MT or an MM down below in the comment section on if you would hire Mike Tomlin, give me an MT, or give me an MM for Mike McCarthy. And we'll see you guys next time. As always, go Jets.